What's up, everyone? It's day 5 of the federal election campaign. And today, one of probably the top 5 funniest things I've ever seen in my life happened, so I'm really excited. But real quick, if you're new here, I was a journalist in the Parliamentary Press Gallery for like 7 years, so I am a big politics nerd, and I am covering this election for you. So there were 2 big stories today, and neither of them were the hilarious thing that I'm so excited to tell you, but you gotta eat your vegetables first, okay? The first big story today, which I think will continue to be the big story for a while, was Trump. With his prime minister hat on today, Liberal leader Mark Carney had a call with Donald Trump, and it definitely seems like Trump might like Carney more than he liked Trudeau, which, to be fair, not saying much. But every time Trump would post about Trudeau, he would call him the governor, and he called Mark Carney the prime minister. He said that in a very calm Truth Social post, where he also referred to the phone call as productive, and said the two of them will be meeting immediately after Canada's upcoming election to work on elements of politics, business, and all other factors. I think Trump forgot to put the caveat, if Carney wins. In his own readout about the call, Carney called it constructive. And Carney also said that the leaders agreed to begin comprehensive negotiations about a new economic and security relationship immediately following the election. Though Carney did acknowledge he has to win the election first. And that's a caveat he did repeat when pressed on potential presumptuousness by reporters this afternoon, during which time he reiterated a lot of what we already knew based on those readouts, so the fact that they're going to have negotiations if Carney wins, and that the Canadian ministers for international trade and foreign affairs are going to have more intensive meetings with their counterparts in the interim. Carney said a few other key things during this press conference, including, quote, "The president did not indicate a pulling back on the tariffs on autos or steel or aluminum during the call." He also reiterated that Canada will retaliate if the tariffs do go into effect as planned next week. And importantly, Carney said, quote, "The president respected Canada's sovereignty today, both in his private and public comments." Which is true. As I already said, Trump did call Carney the prime minister and not the governor. And lastly, reporters did ask Carney about Trump's tone towards Canada because it really did seem like he's taken the temperature down after the call. In response, Carney said, quote, "Perhaps there was a different impression before about how strong Canada really is." Poilievre had a different interpretation of this shift in tone. He said, quote, "It's clear that the president would like to keep the Liberals in power. They've been very good for his agenda. He wants to take our money and our jobs, and the Liberals have helped him do it." But Poilievre overall was a little bit less combative, which isn't a huge surprise when you look at some headlines that are coming out, because a bunch of conservatives behind the scene have started criticizing the Poilievre campaign's current approach, with one top strategist who helped get Doug Ford elected saying that Poilievre needs to urgently pivot or he will lose, and that Poilievre is acting too Trumpy. Global News also just published this article saying that senior conservatives think the Poilievre campaign needs a reset. That is the second big story today after the Trump tariffs. And you can kind of see why they might have some concerns. This is the current projected seat map if the election were held right now, according to 338 Canada. It's yeah, that's a lot of red. For like the 3 Americans watching, red is Liberals. Here, blue is conservatives. So yeah, we'll see if there is a shift in tone in the coming weeks. Poilievre does seem slightly less combative with media lately, although that's kind of been a thing since the campaign kicked off. But he isn't allowing them to ask follow-up questions, which is not good for actually getting answers. And he's still not allowing the media to travel with him on the campaign, which is a huge break from tradition from every party, including conservatives historically. Normally, media travels with the politicians and they pay their own way. But that means when there's a huge news story like the tariffs, and it would make sense for him to be in like Windsor or Oshawa hanging out with auto workers, he's already flying to BC. The media has booked their commercial flights to fly to BC. And if he pivots and all of a sudden goes to Oshawa, then the odds of him getting that national coverage are slightly lower than if he actually had the media traveling with him on the campaign, in which case they would already be on that plane when it turns around, right? So that choice is kind of biting him in the butt a bit. By the way, the actual announcement today from Poilievre on trying to stop all les crimes, another great podium from the Poilievre campaign. The announcement was a promise that his government would slap mandatory life sentences on people who do these crimes that I'm pretty sure I can't say on a lot of the platforms where I post. Carney, meanwhile, pitched a $5 billion trade infrastructure fund aimed at building infrastructure at ports, railroads, inland terminals, airports, and highways to be able to allow Canada to diversify trade partners amid the trade war and improve cooperation between ports instead of them competing with each other. And he made that announcement in Montreal, a place where we speak the language français. Which brings me to one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. This guy who has over 700,000 followers on Twitter. A man who resides in Florida now, despite originally being from Montreal, which makes this more unhinged, posted a video claiming that Mark Carney is a Satanist because apparently Carney was saying an unintelligible satanic mantra. But Carney was just speaking French.
Honnêtement. Ignoha. Et ignoha.
Non, la diable est dans moi. I'm so sorry. So yeah, things are getting even more stupid than ever thought possible. I can't wait to see what the next week in the campaign brings. Until then, what do you think of all this?